Hi there, and welcome to This Day in History for December 10th. December 10th is the 344th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 21 days remaining to the end of the year. 3 short weeks. It'll be here before we know it. Today's word is Eldritch. Eldritch is an adjective that means weird, supernatural, eerie, suggesting the operation of supernatural influences, uncanny, unearthly, weird, supernatural, not existing in nature or subject to explanation according to natural laws, not physical or material. Eldritch things are spooky and weird. They make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. If you're reading a horror or fantasy story, you may see the word eldritch, which means uncanny, unearthly, and weird in a supernatural way. Anything a witch does is eldritch. Goblins and elves are eldritch creatures. A story full of ghosts and strange monsters is full of eldritch elements. I saw motion out there and I thought there was a creature on my window. That's a little eldritch. You won't find much that's eldritch in a story about lawyers or doctors. Those kinds of stories are more realistic, usually. The etymology of the word eldritch is of uncertain origin, perhaps from the Old English elf and rice, which means realm. Earliest documented use is 1508. And in terms of history, today we're going to start in the year 1690, when the first paper currency was issued in the colonies. On December 10th, 1690, a failed attack on Quebec and subsequent near mutiny forced the Massachusetts Bay Colony to issue the first paper currency in the history of the Western Hemisphere. 1690. 1768, the first edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica was published. 1778, John Jay, the former Chief Justice of the New York Supreme Court, was elected President of the Continental Congress. He'd graduated King's College, now Columbia University, at the age of 19 and was a prominent figure in New York state politics from an early age. While Jay opposed British interference in the colonies, he was against complete independence from Great Britain. 1799, France adopted the meter as its official unit of length. 1817, Mississippi became the 20th U.S. state. 1830, the poet Emily Dickenson was born on this day in 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts. On this day in 1864, Union General William T. Sherman completed his march to the sea when he arrived in front of Savannah, Georgia. Since mid-November of that year, Sherman's army had been sweeping from Atlanta across the state to the south and east towards Savannah, one of the last Confederate seaports still unoccupied by Union forces. Along the way, Sherman destroyed farms and railroads, burned storehouses, and fed his army off the land. In his own words, Sherman intended to make Georgia howl, a plan that was approved by President Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant, General-in-Chief of the Union armies. Well, I guess that's one way to win. 1868, the first traffic lights were installed outside the Palace of Westminster in London. Resembling railway signals, they used semaphore arms and were illuminated at night by red and green gas lamps. In 1869, Wyoming granted women the vote. I think we talked about this earlier. They kind of preempted the East on that, didn't they? 1884, Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was published. 1898, the Treaty of Paris ended the Spanish-American War. 1901, the first Nobel Prizes were awarded. This took place in Stockholm, Sweden, in the fields of physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. The ceremony came on the 5th anniversary of the death of Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite and other high explosives. In his will, Nobel directed that the bulk of his vast fortune be placed in a fund in which the interest would be annually distributed in the form of prizes to those who, during the preceding year, shall have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. 1906, President Theodore Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in the mediation of the Russo-Japanese War, becoming the first American to win a Nobel Prize. In 1915, Ford built its 1 millionth car, rolled off the assembly line at the River Rouge plant in Detroit. In 1917, the Red Cross was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. After 3 years of war during which there had been no Nobel Peace Prize awarded, the Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded the 1917 prize to the International Committee of the Red Cross. 1920, the Nobel Prize for Peace was awarded to U.S. President Woodrow Wilson for his work in ending the First World War and creating the League of Nations. 1950, for his peace mediation during the First Arab-Israeli War, American diplomat Ralph Joseph Bunche received the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway. 1953, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill receives the first Nobel Prize in Literature. 1963, 19-year-old Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped for ransom. He was safely recovered and all parties involved in the kidnapping were arrested and prosecuted. 1967, when he left his final recording session in Memphis, Otis Redding intended to return soon to the song he'd been working on. He still had to replace a whistled verse thrown in as a placeholder with additional lyrics that he had yet to write. In the meantime, however, there was a television appearance to make in Cleveland, followed by a concert in Madison, Wisconsin. On its final approach to Madison on this day in 1967, however, the private plane carrying soul music legend Otis Redding would crash into the frigid waters of a small lake 3 miles short of the runway, killing 7 of the 8 men aboard, including Redding. Sittin' on the dock of the bay was released in its unfinished form several weeks later, with Redding's whistled verse a seemingly indispensable part of the now classic record. It would soon become history's first posthumous #1 hit and the biggest pop hit of Redding's career. 2009, the movie Avatar makes its world premiere. This is a 3D science fiction epic helmed by Titanic director James Cameron, and it made its world debut in London and went on to become the highest grossing movie in history. I saw that movie. It's pretty darn cool. Avatar. A little bit Eldritch its own self, Avatar. And I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, links to my research are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And feel free to share. While you're here, check out my other channel, 8 Susquehanna. There's a link in the show notes to that as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Okie dokie, Smokey. Get your numbers turned around. Just read the words. Just read the words. Having a little trouble with my words today. That's a lot of words. Sometimes when you read the words, it's not quite enough if you haven't put enough words in there to begin with. We don't need all those words. Hope I pronounced that right. Thank goodness for editing. So many edits. There I am with my Greta braid, but I'm not scoldy. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? She's not a man. Did I do this whole thing without a microphone? Dadgummit. Well, this is why I don't do live shows.